We're catching up with the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dare, as we take a look at sports development in Nigeria. COVID-19 came and paused all the activities, but what are the plans for post-COVID-19? We also had the National Sports Festival supposed to happen. It paused it. We were getting ready for the Olympics. Olympics got postponed. Infrastructure development is also one area that needs attention in Nigeria. And then came the Nigeria Youth Investment Fund. How will it be beneficial to sportsmen and women? Let's go to our Abuja studio. Mr. Sunday Dare is standing by. Good morning, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, and welcome to Sports This Morning.
Good morning, Austin. Good morning, Austin Okonakwan.
Good morning, Mr. Sunday Dare. Good to have you on the show. Let's begin. I also have Cecilia Omogbe in the studio. Let's begin
Cecilia, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
Join us.
So, Honorable Minister, let's begin this way. COVID-19, that's what everyone is talking about, not just sport. It has come to pause a lot of activities. But when you go back home and reflect, do you see it as a blessing in disguise for sports in Nigeria?
Well, to some extent, the pause we've had in sporting activities due to the COVID-19 pandemic has actually given us a bit of a breather to step back and try to see how we can replan and refarm some of our efforts. But of course, you know, on the part of the athletes who are prepared for either the sports festival or the Olympics, it's been really a downturn for them because most of them have prepared long and hard for these competitions. Most of them earn their pay and revenue from competing, and we had to struggle with those two aspects. The athletes getting rusty, the fact that their stream of income has been blocked. There has been two twin challenges we've had to deal with. And I think that to a large extent, the response of the Ministry of Youth and Sports to some extent through the ad hoc palliative we had, the response of the IOC, the response, that's the International Olympic Committee, the response of the World Athletics and other bodies, the response of FIFA has gone a long way to bring soccer to sportsmen and women across the world, and particularly sportsmen and women in Nigeria. That gladdens our heart. But there are a few lessons learned. We've kind of stepped back to respond in a proactive way to the COVID-19 challenges. Sports, apart from aviation industry, remains one of the hardest hit when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. And you'll recall that it is sports that took the first bold step in this country to shut down the National Sports Festival in a proactive response to stop the spread of COVID-19 in Nigeria.
Okay, interesting. So many plans ongoing. But what are the plans post-COVID? Because we know that once maybe the economy is open to sport, because right now sport is not, part of those things that have been opened by the federal government. Once sports activities can return to the country, what are the plans, knowing that before COVID, there were issues with Athletics Federation of Nigeria, and of course, some issues with basketball. How are we going to resolve this, and what are the plans that we'll put in place once sporting activities resume?
Well, like I said earlier, Cecilia, we've taken a couple of proactive steps, just like other sectors of the economy. We, 2 weeks ago now, came up with a COVID-19 sports resumption protocol, which was put together by the ministry, was circulated among the sporting federations across the country for their input, was benchmarked against a similar sporting protocol of World Athletics, IOC, etc., and even FIFA. And we put that together and submitted our own document to the Presidential Task Force set up by President Muhammadu Buhari on COVID-19. We also submitted a copy to the Senate President and also the Right Honorable Speaker, Honorable Gbajabiamila Amila. In that document, we were also very careful. We did an overall comprehensive protocol for resumption of sports, but also we segmented football and also non-contact sport. We think our first step to reopening a window to sporting activities in Nigeria will be to bring back the non-contact sports. And we outlined the COVID-19 protocol necessary to do that. We hope that this week we can meet with the PTF with a list of about 7 to 8 non-contact sport that can return gradually. And that will start that culture of COVID-19 protocol in sporting activities. Beyond that, you can see football. We have decided, working with the NFF, we had quite a number of meetings. The NFF executive body finally, based on the elections held with club owners, decided that we should end the league season so that we have enough time to prepare to start the next season, 2020-2021. We hope that the intervening period we have will give us time, will give NFF time and our football clubs to get their players, the managers, the coaches to imbibe the COVID-19 protocol, put together in place the COVID-19 infrastructure that is needed to return to our domestic football league. But more importantly, to bring back the licensing conditions and regulations that are necessary, because we're entering a new regime in which all licensing conditions in the books for our domestic club must be enforced to the letter, such that if we're going to end up with just 8 clubs, I think we're ready. We want to put value on our domestic club. We want to put value on our players. We want to make sure that our league, professional league in this country, starts to be at par with what we see in the EPL, La Liga, and Bundesliga.
Sounds good. Let's talk about the National Sports Festival, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports. Is it realistic that it will happen this year?
Oh, yeah. Austin, that's a $1 million question. But I can say that our expectation is that it happens this year. And I take my cue from the meeting of the National Council on Sports. That is the highest sports decision-making body in the country. We had a virtual meeting about 3 months ago, about 11 weeks ago, and the council unanimously agreed that the sports festival should hold in 2020. That means between now and perhaps December. We immediately set up an 11-man committee that went to Benin to check the sporting infrastructure, to check the COVID-19 infrastructure in place, to see how the protocols are set out. And they have worked within 30 days. The report was submitted to the ministry. An implementation committee is looking at it. Recall that on that team we had the NCDC representative, we had the health ministry, and we had a representative from the PTF. So they did a thorough job. What they have done is to recommend, standing in line that, well, looking at between now and December, what are the possibilities? What are the things that should be in place? But I think for us, the most important is working with the PTF and the NCDC and the health ministry, looking at the numbers. We're hitting a spike in this country. Before we can return to sports, we must flatten that curve. The numbers must start to come down. And when you look at sporting regimes in other countries, in Europe and other places, it's because to some extent they have hit that curve. They have flattened the curve, and then they have put in place enough testing, enough COVID infrastructure. People are obeying the COVID protocols as necessary to a large extent. I think we'll be looking at these indices, working with the necessary authorities before we can take a decision. I've said it repeatedly. The Ministry of Youth and Sports will be properly guided before we take a final decision.
That's interesting. Now, you've talked about esports and how we can actually, channel most of our resources and, of course, the youth into playing that sport. What's the update on this? How do you intend to actually achieve this, knowing that we're always having issues when it comes to internet in the country?
You talk about esports. Esports is, I think, where this country is a bit of a late starter. The last time I checked esports, and China's actually did a good spotlight, about 5 minutes, some 2 months ago on esports. That is a 1.38 billion sport in the world right now, and it's still growing. We think that with the savvy nature of our youth, with the love for games, different sports in this country, we think that it's important that we also introduce esports in Nigeria. Already we've had an esports federation caretaker committee put in place, an interim federation leadership put in place, which will be inaugurated shortly. But also we know that as the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy works to improve the bandwidth, improve the speed, work with telecommunication providers to also provide necessary data speed, a lot has been done in that respect. We hope that esports will come back alive fully, and it can engage a large number of our youth who can easily earn a lot of revenue from participating in esports. And I think this country is ready for esports.
Okay, we'll continue to monitor that because that's a good way for us to, join the rest of the world in looking at sports as a business. Let's bring the discussion back home now. Infrastructure development. And I can remember when you just came into office, with the Adopt a Talent campaign, there was also Adopt a Sporting Infrastructure. What's the update on the National Stadium in Lagos and the National Stadium in Abuja? Because I know that the committee put together for the tenanted occupancy in Lagos have submitted their reports.
Thank you, Austin. I think, like I normally say, that the elephant in the room for sports development in this country, one of the elephants in the room is infrastructure. A lack of infrastructural rationalization over the years in this country has seen to limiting our sporting successes. And we are set under President Buhari, who has given us tremendous support. As a minister, I've enjoyed the ears of Mr. President to support us. And that's why the submission to have sports turn into business from being a recreation at all, that has happened. We have received the nod that sports becomes a business. And that's why very soon we're going to have a national sports industry policy that will turn our sports into business. But to return to infrastructure, we look at the three I's and the single P: infrastructure, investment, incentive, and the policy. On policy, the policy is almost ready. On infrastructure, it is big. And what we did when we came in about 11 months ago is to start the Adopt initiative, to look at adopt a football pitch, adopt a sports center, and adopt an athlete. Let me stay with infrastructure. We decided to come up with a model of public-private partnership. And we decided to single out a number of influential Nigerians who love sports. Alhaji Aliko Dangote loves not just football, but sports generally. We approached him to say the main ball of the National Stadium needs some major repairs. We've worked with Alhaji Dangote and his group in the last 8 months. We have reached a final point in which the contractor will soon be mobilized to site to bring back the pitch, the track, the scoreboard, the lighting, and the irrigation system of the National Mashood Abiola Stadium in Abuja. For us, we think that the 9 months in which we've worked with the Dangote Group has been worth it, benchmark against best practices, so that whatever we get there is topmost quality. When you look at Surulere Stadium, 20 years abandoned, neglected. Under President Buhari, we've been able to bring back hope. The first is that the concession approval we have for the National Stadium Surulere is now back on course. We have a transaction advisor that will take us to the point where we're going to have the RFQ, where those interested will be able to apply to be able to concession. But beyond that, the task force that was set up submitted its report. And the task force report will, this week, be subjected to an implementation review at the ministry. We intend to return the National Stadium Surulere to its original blueprint. We intend to make sure that every illegal structure that has been put in place that is not part of the blueprint will be removed. And thereafter, leave the place unencumbered so that whoever is interested in concessioning the stadium will have free access. That is the first step. The second step is we're also looking at adopt a sports center and a pitch. We have approached Chief Kashington Adebutu Kashington, who has agreed to make available £500 million to start fixing some of the key facilities in the stadium, pending when we're able to complete the concession process. And I think that will help because that can open a slight window to make some of the facilities in Surulere to be functional. And I think we're talking to quite a number of people. In Kaduna, Governor El-Rufai has begun the rehabilitation of the Ahmadu Bello Stadium in Kaduna. The governor of Oyo State has called, showing interest in working to bring back the Obafemi Awolowo Stadium in Ibadan. That's the former Liberty Stadium. If not for the COVID-19 pandemic that slowed down most of our plans, and it affected virtually everyone, I think we will have gone further than this. But we're glad that there's a window for us to start engaging and we're not resting on our oars.
We're taking a look at sports development in Nigeria. COVID-19 came and paused everything, but the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dare, who is a special guest, talking to us from our Abuja studio, says, in a way, if we look at it, it's a blessing in disguise. And we're taking a look at post-COVID-19 plans for sports in Nigeria. I want you to be part of the discussion. Come, let us play for the love of the game. What do you have to say as regards everything that he has said? Or if you have questions, comments, suggestions for the Honorable Minister, send it to us on Twitter. We are channels_sports. And we've opened a thread telling you that we're having that discussion and it's tied around developing sports in Nigeria. So send in those questions, comments, and suggestions. We're going to push them to Mr. Sunday Dare just before he leaves the studio in Abuja, Cecilia.
Okay, and he's still very much with us in Abuja, the sports minister. And of course, our next question is coming from Austin hinted about it earlier concerning the Nigerian investment funds. How can sportsmen and women actually benefit from this particular fund?
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia. The NYIF, or the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, is a fund that is dedicated, that provides also an accelerated access for the youth of our country who want to be entrepreneurs to get access funds that will support their enterprise, the ideas they have, and also the innovative minds that they have. We believe that by giving them this accelerated access, we can make of several of our youth in various fields of endeavor entrepreneurs. They become wealth creators, they become employer of labor, and also we help them to self-start. This, of course, NYIF comes to complement several other government programs that are youth-focused at different levels within different ministries and departments of government. But we think that clearly across the world, the only way you can really address and bring down the numbers of youth unemployment is by turning them into entrepreneurs. And to do that, you must invest in their ideas, invest in the plans they have, support the enterprises. So we thank President Buhari for approving this with the entirety of the Federal Executive Council members who stood solidly behind the Nigerian youth last week. Now, how can the youth benefit from it? You know, to a very large extent, a large number of our youth are engaged in sports. When you look at the sport value chain, beyond just being an active talent or participant or athlete, there's a value chain in the sporting industry. For instance, football boots, the merchandise, football boots, football jerseys, stockings, football itself, tennis rackets, etc. If we find our youths, and so many of them are involved in that, that can produce sneakers, can produce football boots, jerseys, and the rest, they can step forward, come up with their ideas, with a business plan, and come forward and access the fund that we have in NYIF. And I think there's an opportunity for our youth in the sporting sector. Beyond that, of course, several of our youth are also involved in several other sectors. We have seen the explosive potentials of our youth on the global stage. Most of them are snatched up by other countries who easily make credit available for them, venture capitalists. This time, Nigeria is taking a risk, is putting its money behind the ideas of our youth, and we're saying it is time to improve on that local content, and the country is ready to invest in the ideas of our youth. So the value chain of sports, which is a long one, as you know, Austin and Cecilia, we expect that our youth will apply themselves. They must apply themselves to this opportunity, step forward with the ideas, a business plan that is workable and fundable, and of course, the fund will be there to support them.
It sounds good. And the moment that I heard about the approval by the Federal Executive Council, and then looking at it, it's a big amount of money, 75 billion. What came to mind is sports business. And you've been talking about it since you came on board. Do we have the right environment? Are we enabled enough in this country to make sports a proper business?
Well, absolutely. Austin, if you look at it, some of what we're doing is calibrated. We're careful not to put the cart before the horse. We came up with the NIF, not just because of the youth in sports, but because we know that we must create a business model around sports. And when you look at sports, it's not just about sporting activities. Look at various allied industries that also benefit from sports, from soft drink industry. You know, you see the sponsors in different countries, even in Nigeria. And I think that this country is ripe, is overdue to turn its sports into business. You look at, by the sheer niche number that we have, almost 200 million population. You look at the length and breadth of this country, the potentials that we have. You look at the sponsors out there who easily reach for talents so long as they are produced. And I think that unless we have the policy, it's the policy that drives that business environment. We will see our countrymen and women step forward to invest, to take a risk in sports development, like we see in other countries. Austin, you just imagine last week, I think 2 Nigerians actually bought 2 foreign football clubs. Mm-hmm. As much as that is very interesting, for me as a sports minister and as a Nigerian, I'd rather see a reversal of that, such that rather than buying foreign football clubs, these Nigerians can come and buy one of our football clubs, build a stadium in Nigeria, fund this football club, and that's part of sports as business. But then we don't have the atmosphere. But I can assure them that with the sports as business policy coming in place, with the support we have received so far from the President Buhari-led government, I think that a new vista in sports development in this country is about to happen.
That's a good one. We know that continuity is always a problem when it comes to sports in Nigeria. For instance, you have a whole lot of ideas that you put in place. What's the possibility that these can be institutionalized so that any other minister that will come, into the office will be able to continue with what you've started?
Yeah, Cecilia, that's why we have gone the route of policy. We have reviewed the past national sports policies we've had over the years, about 3 of them. We have taken a major decision at the level of the National Council on Sports, the highest making body. We have the support from there. We have put together a team that has been working in the last 9 months to see how we can put together a reviewed sports policy with a business model for a sports industry embedded in it. Once that is enshrined in the policy, it enjoys automatically continuity in government. You can only review and update. And when you look at it, this country is almost 10, 15 years behind when it comes to turning sports into industry. You go to a country like Jamaica, as small as it is, sports is an industry. And you see the successes they've recorded over time. You see the value placed on their athletes when they're being bought or when they move to other countries. I think that with policy in place, a policy that is clear, a policy that is pragmatic, a policy that has all the stakeholders, that has the buy-in of all the stakeholders, we can get started. And the earlier we do, the better for sports development in our country.
Mm. I think it was in February I had a conversation with you right there at our Abuja studio, and we talked a lot about preparing Team Nigeria for the Olympics. We never knew that COVID would come and pause everything. But Honorable Minister,
absolutely,
what's the updates, particularly as regards players' welfare? Because I get calls from players and athletes saying, look, we are not getting the support we need. Did we pause everything because the Olympics have been pushed to next year?
Austin, not exactly. You know very well, Austin, like I know, that the global sporting ecosystem is connected. So when World Athletics decides to provide palliative financial support for athletes across the world, Nigeria benefits from it. Mm-hmm. When IOC does that, we benefit. Just look at FIFA. FIFA has also approved certain amounts of money. We know that before the first week of August, that the fund would be available from FIFA, not just to Nigeria, but other countries that have been approved to benefit from it. That is also part of the sporting ecosystem support that comes in. But then to bring it back to the local level, You'll recall that in the height of the lockdown, we decided to initiate an ad hoc palliative support for our sportsmen and women. Based on a criteria that was set by the ministry, we were able to reach out and, a function of the fund, we put together about 11 million, which was domiciled with the central bank. We were able to reach out to 220 athletes across this country, both home-based and foreign. It wasn't the question of the quantum of the amount. It was the fact that we were given some kind of band aid at that very critical period when there was a lockdown. And each athlete got about 50,000 naira directly into their accounts. Beyond that, we have seen efforts being made by various federations at their own level to see how they can support. And I think that because of funds paucity on the part of the ministry, we can really not do much beyond that. And that's why we appreciate what has been done by these international bodies. But let me also say that in the next 1 week or two, we're also bothered about the fact that our athletes are getting rusty. The ministry has concluded plans with the High Performance Center in Port Harcourt to see how we can work with the federations to begin to rotate a team of 20 athletes to go to the High Performance Center for 2 weeks, fully funded by the ministry, where they can go with their coaches, do some training. We can't take more than 20 in a batch, and then just rotate them, 20 in the first batch, after 2 weeks, another 20 goes, because that performance center has what it's needed. And we can deal with that aspect of them getting rusty so that we can start to get them tuned up for the Olympics. We hope that eventually when the global sporting community starts to open up gradually, some of them will have the opportunity to compete at college championships and other global events. What Athletics is looking towards that, and I think that will indeed improve their lot.
That's an interesting one concerning the welfare of different players, athletes across the globe. Now, let's bring it back to the ones here in Nigeria. For instance, we've had issues of some clubs owing players salaries, not being able to pay. Is there something in place for some of these players, how they can actually address these issues, especially when some of these clubs are owned by the government?
Well, I think the closest answer to your question, Cecilia, right now is the respite of the funds coming from FIFA. I know that under the categorization, there's a portion of that fund that must go directly to the clubs from NFF. What we will try to do is to make sure that NFF ensures that when this allocation in US dollars gets to the clubs, they are used directly to fund the players' welfare, particularly in terms of salaries. But I think to the bigger issue is the fact that we are now committed to ensuring, working through the NFF and of course LMC, to make sure that we enforce to the letter the licensing controls, the financial controls of the clubs, well stipulated. And part of that is their salaries. You must pay, there's a minimum you must pay every player. And other conditions are there. What we've had in the past is that several of these clubs have found a way to get licensed and approved to compete without fulfilling this. I think we're entering a new regime of enforcement, such that, like I said earlier, if it's only 8 clubs that meet these licensing regulations and conditions, and they're in the books, they've been there, we just need to enforce them. We're entering a new enforcement regime, and we hope that that will protect the players, because without the players, you can't talk about football and the domestic league. So we're making the players the most important asset of our domestic league. And the laws as they are right now protects them. The administrators just need to step up to the plate and make sure that these regulations are enforced. And we'll carry the club owners along. We'll remind them of what these regulations are, and we'll give them the time they need to be able to fulfill these regulations and controls that are required of them.
Honorable Minister, the youths are now watching, and so they are sending in questions. One says, can the Honorable Minister please explain more on the Nigeria Youth Investment Fund? When is it taking off, and how do we assess these funds?
Austin, that's interesting. Let me start by saying I think that, you know, I did say that the youth must apply themselves to the opportunities that are there. And part of that is also because they spend quite a number of hours every day online on their smartphones. They need to go out there and check NYIF. Since Thursday morning, the ministry has put up a lot of information, at least a starter pack, so that you even get to understand the grand norm of the NYIF as a youth who wants to benefit from it. There's one we call 10 things you must know about NIIF. They should go online and look at that. There's also a statement that was released by the ministry, the permanent secretary yesterday, that also gives further details. And I think in the next, beginning from today, a couple of meetings we'll hold at the level of the Ministry of Finance and other key stakeholders. And then the details will be eventually released. Our hope is that before the end of this year, we are looking at an October starting point. As soon as the funds are available, the window to have them access this fund will be open for them. Already we have some of the key infrastructure we need to start the process, but there are a couple of things we need to tie up at the governmental level, and as soon as that is done. But I think what's important is that this opportunity comes to them and challenges our youth who have ideas and those that don't have to come up with ideas that are fundable, that are practicable, and then they can access the funds.
Honorable Minister, what's the update on the Adopt Talents initiative? Are the sponsors being real with their promises?
Well, that's Adopt an Athlete. You will agree with me that the COVID-19 actually really slowed down that process, because we were at a peak in March before COVID-19 pandemic struck. I can tell you that as at March, we had about 6 of our athletes that have signed that MOU and have received funds directly, either in dollars or naira, into their accounts. Just before the pandemic, we had 18 other athletes lined up, about to sign the MOU, and then the fund will go into their account. Austin, as you know, is a 3-4-step process. The ministry makes the pitch for the athlete. The organization or individual decides on which athletes to adopt. The ministry brings the organization or the individual together with the athletes to sign an MOU, already cleared by our legal department, to protect the athletes or the two parties. And once that MOU is signed, the fund now goes directly to the account of the athlete. So we had 18 lined up, apart from the 6 that benefited directly. 18 were lined up, and then COVID-19 struck. Some of these people are businessmen. Some of them are companies. They're just beginning to recover. And we've gone back to them. Their promises are solid. And then the others, the pitch has continued. We know that Governor Okowa had agreed to adopt about 6 or 7. That promise, of course, we know that will be redeemed. Governor Baseki, the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, all of them, we're reaching back to them to reactivate the promise they have made, to sign the MOUs. And we hope that between now and October this year, we should be able to deliver on 45 out of 67 of our athletes that were put on the path of the Adopt an Athlete initiative.
Okay, that's a good one. I'll just take these tweets coming from Aderonke Adeshola. He says that Nigeria is known to be dominated by football. I mean, we care more about football. How is the Youth and Sports Ministry planning to engage youth in other sports? This is coming from Aderonke Adeshola.
Cecilia, we're not planning. We have started implementing. I think I can say that repeatedly I've said that I'm not a football minister. And over time, in the last 11 months, I've had windows of opportunity to really diversify the focus away from football. Yeah, very clearly, football is king when it comes to the sporting activity in this country. The followership is massive. The data, the statistics, even the funds, you know, you can't deny that. But we realize that we also have talents in other sporting activities. And we have placed a lot of premium on about 11 of them: wrestling, boxing, badminton, and I can go athletics, on and on. We have, in various ways, supported them through their qualifiers, made funds available in a timely fashion, unlike in the past, and we have shown that Nigeria is beyond football in a very deliberate way. And that will continue as we allocate resources, as we provide opportunities, we'll make sure that these resources and opportunities are spread just beyond football to other sporting activities. You also recall our talent hunt program. We focused on also finding talents. We find more talents in other sporting activities than football. We find talent in wrestling, talent in boxing, talent in swimming, and that's part of refocusing and broadening our sports concentration in this country.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dare. We appreciate you for your time. We'll do this again. Thank you.
Austin, thank you for bringing me back. And then we hope that the pause buttons will be lifted and we can return back to normal sporting activities.
That's the hope. Thank you so much.